Thank you, Miss Carly. Lovely as always. All right, watching the tennis match again. We're gonna move these chairs a little closer so that it's kind of weird when you're up here. But anyway, good morning, everybody. Welcome, members, friends, guests, in person, virtual, or in the future, to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. The UUFP has been a liberal religious voice here in Pottstown for 55 years. And we've had several homes, not just this one. Early services were in a number of places until we built this building in the 1970s. And I mean, we built the building. The folks who started this fellowship put in their time and their talent to design, saw boards and drywall and hammer lots of nails to construct our beautiful home. We who now have this place in our care want to continue and to expand on their legacy. We're painting, and sometimes we're pounding nails, and we're digging in the garden, but the loving work continued. But in this time, our core values have not changed. We continue to believe that every person matters, and diversity is a gift to be celebrated, and that our different backgrounds make for an open and vibrant community. Because no matter these different backgrounds or our reasons for coming through the doors, we are all here because we have made a choice to join this fellowship family. Our services reflect these very voices, and one week may vary greatly from the next. But we all hope in some small way to touch your spirit, heart, and mind. So whoever you are, wherever you come from, and whomever you love, we are so glad you are here with us today. And I'm Mary Ryan. I'm your service presenter this morning. I always struggle with, what do I call myself? Carly Shell, hiding back over there, is our pianist. Justine Braun is handling the tech duties. And Chloe Murdoch will be lighting our chalice this morning because we're starting a little something. And if it's your first time here and you haven't already and John hasn't invited you, please sign in our guest book so that you can receive our newsletter, The Sojourner. And of course, everybody is free to join us for coffee hour and munchies in the back in the social hall after service. Is it time now for it is time. It is time now for announcements. So if you have an announcement, please come forward and this mic's on and let us know your announcement. And while we're waiting for somebody to walk up, I was going to say I had 5 submissions for the sign, so I was very impressed. I liked them all. So I'm going to have to put them in because they came in different formats and things. So I have to figure out how to put them. So I probably do a slide show and we'll present them and then we'll vote probably in a few. If my service next is April 23rd, I'm going to try to shoot for that. So thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Miranda. Still Miranda. And just a reminder, we have a 102 session today. You 102. Welcome to come, whoever you are. So it will be a little bit of history of Unitarian Universalism in this country or in North America, and a little bit about UUFP's history and a little bit about how we do things. So welcome anyone that wants to come. We're meeting right after the service. People that want to participate and grab some coffee and some goodies at the coffee hour, and we're going to meet in the RV wing in what used to be called the teen room, but is now what I call the rental room. But anyway, join us. It's fun.
Are there any other announcements? Okay, now phones go into worship mode, please. As the chimes call us together. My mother used to go to a theater in Skokie, and they would also tell people all the things they wanted them to do, and one of them was spit out your gum. They wanted to quiet during this. So our chalice lighting this morning is going to be the first of our changes. As we're going to start something different with our service. I think Miss Ruby is working on it. But what she's going to do is we're going to be asking the tweens to come up and light the chalice every Sunday on a quasi rotating basis. So Alan, it takes 4 or 5 people to replace you. So this morning, Chloe is going to come up, Chloe Murdoch is going to come up and light our chalice lighter. And our chalice light is, as soon as I start reading the next line. Our chalice lighting this morning is Our Hope and Our Passion by Pat Uribe Lupi. We light our chalice this morning, knowing that our hope and our passion are needed to change the world. We bring different gifts to the work, but we come together in one faith that what we do makes a difference, both to our world and in ourselves. Thank you very much, Chloe. Good job. Now, if you'll please stay seated and join me in singing Spirit of Life. It's 123 your great hymnals, or it's up on the screens. Well, we're coming to the end of our journey of this epic story. One of our members calls the best story ever. Oops, those are the wrong words. You see, we're done with Shackleton. But I could not resist. So I thought I would go out to the web to see if I could find some profound essay on change that I could read this morning as my opening words. And so I wrote in just change. And what is the first thing that pops up? Word. Word. A thing on how to handle change management at work. And I, between the chuckles and the crying, I had to just go, oh my heavens, so, and cringe a little bit, because basically change management in my previous life as an IT support person was one of the drivers to me retiring early. The rules, the changes to the rules, the breaking of the rules, the excuses for the breaking of the rules. The bosses who insisted that up was down, down was up, and left was right. It's like, okay, I'm out, I'm done. So I took the plunge and I retired. And frankly, I wanted to do it a year earlier, but my mother talked me out of it. So, and I had planned, because they were annoying me so much, on being a bit of a red thing and giving them 2 weeks' notice. I wanted a December 31st cutoff date, so 1/1/2016 was gonna be that date. So I was gonna give them 2 weeks' notice. Would have been lousy around that time of year, but I was not being very you. So about sometime in early October, my immediate supervisor called me and said, we need to let some people go because they're cutting back on how much they're paying our consulting firm. And he gave me 3 or 4 names and said, who can I cut of this group? And that we can still support the applications. And I said, none of them. I can't lose any of them. They are the technical people that keep this stuff up and running. I may have been over them, but my job was mostly coordinating all the changes, herding cats, and talking people off of ledges. So he asked me, who would I suggest? And I sort of thought, I don't want to tell it now, but I get it. Me. And he was silent for a moment, and he said he checked to see with our boss if that was okay. And I'm like, well, you don't have much choice here, but so we'll go ahead. So, but I'm thinking I had to call what I was going to do early, because they were going to let those people go right away. And I knew I was leaving, and I couldn't let them lose their jobs and then leave later, because all 3 of them could be saved for what they were paying me, because they were offshore in India. So that's what I did. I kept my December 31st retirement date, and I gotta tell you, I haven't regretted it for a second. But it was a huge change in my life. All of a sudden, I wasn't having to get up and go out. I have my alarm set for 9 o'clock when I remember who said it. Usually I just whatever. But think about it, in that phone call, there were so many changes that happened. And because we went from 3 people leaving to 1 person leaving, and the time frame changed and a whole bunch of stuff. And it also changed these opening words, because I still don't remember what I originally planned to write. So sometimes you just have to change your direction and go with the flow. So now we have our story for all ages, and it's Valerie. Oh, you're not coming? Oh, well, I was told it was Valerie. So I'm sorry. So it's Miss Kim. So Kim is going to come up and read to the children and to us.
Actually, yeah, it's not a scary app. It's a discussion.
Oh, it's a discussion.
Yes,
So we're gonna go with Miss Mary's topic about cleaning. And so I'm gonna talk to you guys about changing your clothes. Who here has had to go through their clothes closets? Like every year or so, something your parents make you do? I see one hand. Anybody else have to go through the closet?
When I just did this week.
So I'm wondering, how do you decide what you're going to keep and what you're gonna get rid of? And
So when I hold it up to you, you might say yes or no.
okay, and why would you say yes or no?
So then you.
Maybe it doesn't fit. Or maybe it has a hole in it.
When I was at one of them, my mom would them for the back.
Yeah. But sometimes things get old and they don't fit anymore and you get rid of it and you clean it out of your closet, right? Okay, well, can you tell me what's left in your closet when you're done going through it? And,
So say you still like.
okay, and then what else? You get some new things sometimes?
Yeah, I need that one. That's one square, just give me.
Hand-me-downs, yeah. Sometimes they're older things, sometimes they're newer things, maybe a mix of both. Now, can we switch gears, and I've got a question for the adult. Does anybody remember how long ago this church was founded? Okay, 1967. Yeah, 55, over 55 years ago. And, what if we could get the next? Oh, that was the first one, next one. There we go. So I looked up and, to see what people were wearing back in 1967. So I got some of what kids were wearing. Do we think that would be fashionable today, or maybe a little weird? Yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll go to the next one. There's one more slide. Yes. You wearing that anymore? Well, there's some things that are similar. Yeah. Those people, they might have been to one of our services dressed like that. They still went to church on Sunday. They still had sermons. They still prayed prayers and sang hymns, and they still taught their children what they thought was important. But the things they believe and their ideas are kind of like the clothes in our closets. Like our clothes, we need to look at our beliefs every now and again and ask ourselves if they still fit. Perhaps they're worn out, or maybe things that we're not going to wear anymore. Maybe there's something we borrowed from somebody else. But we want to look at our beliefs and reflect, does that really fit who we are on our inside? Keep the ones that still fit, still work, and still have meaning for us when we wear them. And our beliefs may change with us as we grow and we change, but they always remain true to who we are. Change is a part of our circle of life. All right. So now the adults are gonna sit and talk some more about change while you guys go off to your
So it was time to do something about my closet. When I put the jeans up and the whole rack fell down. You know, they dry out, those little clips. It is now time for our offertory. John, the UUFP has been around 55 years and counting because of its members and friends. We use our time and our talent to continuously work on our building and our grounds. We do this through the things like the lovely mural and the fresh paint job back in the social hall and the periodic labors of love Saturdays. But sometimes we need a little treasure too. So that's why we're passing the basket. All gifts are greatly appreciated. Thank you, Carly. Thank you, John. And thank you, everybody. All right. Join me now. Oh, this is interesting. 38. Okay, I've got 30 in my thing. Hymn number 38, Morning Has Broken, in the gray hymnal. Yeah. Pretty quiet practicing this morning, too. Change is all around us, large and small every day. Some are as simple as changing our closets, changing stoplights on the way to the fellowship, or what we're going to wear when we come in here. Other changes are massive, things that impact us from local, regional, state, national, and even international levels. We're going to stay a little closer to home today. We're all comfortable when we know what's going to happen. We come to this fellowship each Sunday expecting to hear a sermon or a talk, watch the children and listen to, or even participate in their own story. And we come to enjoy some wonderful music, connect with our friends, and make new friends at the coffee hour. When something happens to change that, we're thrown a bit. Like when they close off the street down here, which they did a while back, have to figure out a new way to get here. Or we have to decide, do I like that change? Do I like what they just did? And then we say, well, yeah, but nah, I could with it. And we may voice our displeasure or our pleasure at what has happened. Or frankly, we may not even notice at all. For example, years and years ago, when we bought our house, my father decided he was going to take off the doors of all the doors off the cabinets and the pantry, and he was going to take them down in his workshop and stain them. He had Mom picked out a stain and everything, and she was so excited. He was telling us all how this was going to look. And then we waited. And we waited a little more, and another project started, and another one started. Even some of them got done. But Mom really wanted her doors, and she voiced this desire often. Howard, please, I want the doors. Things are getting dusty and falling out. You know, I'll get them done. I'll get them done. This is over a year. And finally, my dad was a college professor, so his classes were over. He was home by about 1. So he had a lot to do around that house. And one afternoon after school, he told my sister Becky and me, hey, we're ready. I've got the doors. Let's put them up and surprise your mom. Ooh. And so we ran and we put all the doors up. And I made dinner in those days so that it would be ready when she got home from work. And so we had dinner already, the table set. We all sat down in great anticipation there in the kitchen, and she didn't notice. I mean, it was, anyway. Dad was crushed. Becky and I were hysterical. We were laughing so hard. And Mom's like, what, huh? And we pointed out. And they were beautiful. She was so happy. But here's something, you don't always notice. The dictionary definition of change is to become different, to undergo transformation, or transition or substitution, to undergo a modification to make it different. When we painted the sanctuary and then the social hall, the changes were greeted with raves. And it was very rewarding to all of us who had picked up a paintbrush. But there were a couple who didn't notice. It went from orange to blue, but there were a couple of people that did not notice. But everybody did notice these 2 TV screens that went up during COVID. And that our virtual services and these screens were born out of COVID, because we had Zoom services after a while. And we realized, hey, we don't have to stop with this process when we go back live. We can have that openness to everybody, and we can still have services from all around the country. Or we haven't done it yet, but we could have somebody speaking from Great Britain or France or South America. We could have them speaking from anywhere. Huge, huge change to the UUFP. It was born out of COVID, that pandemic that impacted every single person on planet Earth. So I think you could say that is making lemonade out of lemons. But that is a big change to us. But it's not all that big a change in the grand scheme of things, right? It was a planned change in response to an unplanned event, that COVID lockdown. And most changes aren't driven by something as monumental as a pandemic, and we have to thank our stars for that one. And these are the ones that are the hardest, the ones that are forced on us by an outside force. Changes even elective changes aren't easy. Divorce, when you choose, isn't easy, no matter what the circumstance is. Getting married is a huge change. So is having a baby. Building a new house, or just moving from one house to another. Or me, who I'm constantly rearranging my living room. But even when it's elective, it can still be stressful. And each of these changes in people's personal lives has an impact here on all of us at the UUFP. We've gained and we've lost members to all kinds of different events. Aging can cause you to change how you feel about things. Think about naps. When you were a child, nap. Somewhere along the line that changed, and it is now a luxury. And I think I figured out when it happened, and that was freshman year of college studying for finals. Or it may have been midterms, because it's like, let's take 15 minutes. Okay, cool. So I think that's when that happened. One of my favorite comments on aging and growing is Mark Twain saying how much smarter his parents got as he got older. Remember, and how many of us think the same thing? Or we don't want to do what my parents didn't say in my day. It happens. But what all of us as individuals have survived one of the biggest changes we will ever experience: birth. Think about it. You went from your nice, cozy, warm, private home, and then came out into a big, cold place. And what's the first thing we do? We cry. And there's a very good reason for that. But it's a massive change for parents. Their lives change in so many ways, and some more expected than others. The warm and fuzzy pictures that you see of parenthood are quickly dispelled by the reality of dirty diapers and sleepless nights. And even though their lives are vastly different, not many parents will go back to the way it was before, even if it is a little less warm and fuzzy. But institutions such as this one change too, by every person that walks through the door. And that's true whenever we join any group. You get married, you join a new family or a new family, you know, join back and forth. It's a constant. There isn't a day where something doesn't change in your life, as minor as it could be, and you don't even think about it. But we resist those that are forced on us. Sometimes reasons are better than others. Vaccine resistance is the one that just, I don't get. Refusing something that has been proven to save lives for no other reason than a political statement makes no sense. But that's a topic for another day. And as one who had mumps and measles and 3 weeks of red measles and landed in the hospital, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But a good many of these resisted changes happen at work. You've been doing something for years, and you have that process, it works, it's down pat, and someone comes in and presents a new process that you have to do, and just, you're gonna suck it up. The rationale for these changes, in my experience in some jobs, is derives from someone new at the top of the food chain who says, I have to make my mark and prove that I deserve this job. So they do something different. Or it could be a consultant that is paid big bucks for advice, and so that we look like we didn't waste our money on that advice, we implement their ideas. In one of my lives, I was a copywriter at Sears. And every 2 or 3 years, there'd be a fresh crop of MBAs that would come in, and they were going to show us how to do the catalog right. And we'd be presented with all this advice for page, you know, redesign and all this stuff. And we kind of had to do it because they were just fresh out of Harvard or the U of C or Michigan or something. It was never flat out bad advice, but it really wasn't anything earth shattering or new. And we was usually going back to something we'd already done. And then the cycle would repeat every couple of years, and we'd just go back and pull the old file. But there was always at least a little something that was useful. Then the biggest change came when we went from typewriters, mainly manuals, to computers. And there was a lot, some of the, how can I politely say, well, they were younger then than I am now. So in those days, older people were like, oh gosh, it's gonna be so much work. They're worried about how many extra keystrokes you would do. And I was one of the 2 writers that were used to pick out the system that we were going to use. And even though there was some grousing at the beginning, in pretty short order, there was great acceptance across the board. And you know why? It was less work. Because there is one wonderful key on a computer keyboard that is not on a typewriter, and we all know what it is, it's backspace delete. That backspace delete key saved so much time. You didn't have to re-put in new paper, draw the line for your width or anything like that. It was just bang, bang, bang. By the time we were done, we were getting ready to print. We were sending print-ready pages to the printers. But while all this efficiency was going on, something else was happening. Those fat and happy heydays of the late 70s and early 80s were gone. And when they pulled the plug on us in January of 1993, our department, which had been more than 400 people when I started in October of 1983, was down to 110. And in that year, 1992, we put out more pages than any time in the history of the company. And I think that was around 14,000 different pages. But that didn't just impact our little 110. It impacted 50,000 people, 50,000 of us employees across the country who lost their jobs. And it impacted Americans, especially children everywhere, because they were no longer going to get the wish book so they could circle all their Christmas presents. Now, it impacted the suppliers of the products sold, the paper companies, and the printers who used enough ink every year to fill Soldier Field. How many people know football, but big football stadium. Press runs of 14 million. It was the end of an American institution, and I know some people are understanding this a whole lot better than others. The only people who were celebrating, I am sure, were the mailmen. Because my favorite line from Cheers, where Cliff, the mailman, comes in and he's like, and they said, what happened? And he goes, Sears and Penny's both dropped their catalogs on the same day. And for those of you who don't remember what those semi-annual books look like, can you imagine carrying a whole load of these in a mail bag and having to drop them off? So, yeah, it was a lot of work. So changes can impact how we feel about ourselves and the world around us. They can cause us to stop and think, and reevaluate how we look at things. The shuttering of that catalog was surreal. But by the time I was laid off for the fourth time 20 years later, I'd gotten pretty used to it. And I had a different reaction each time. And I think it could be called change in perspective, because as hard as it is, it's survivable. Here at the UUFP, we've been through so many changes since our founding. The founders met in different places before this was. And I think, Linda, you were around, were you around for the Grange? Probably not. Well, there were a couple of other spots that they met before somebody gave them 10 acres. 10 beautiful acres here in the woods are all around here. It's ours. And they built this fellowship home. In my time here since 1999, we've gone from having a minister to being 100% lay-led, back to a minister and a little bit lay-led, and back and forth and back and forth. I don't know how many times. I could have counted, but I forgot. But even when we had a 100% minister, we had at least one lay-led service a month, because that is our history. As much as we have been here through all the changes, it's the lay-led part. And by me lay-led, I mean like Anna a couple weeks ago, and me and Emily, where one of us gets up, or somebody who's not a minister, and does the speaking. It's not just being the lay leader. And during that time, we've had people who really, really, really want to minister, and others who really, really, really did not. And so it's all part of our world here, trying to figure out how to keep everybody kind of at least semi-happy because of the minister and the non-minister. Physically, even this building has changed. That it used to end the slant in the back of the wall here and at the doors right outside here. That whole back section wasn't added until 1999 during a capital campaign. And only a few people are left here since I first arrived, and there are 4 in the room right now. Albert, Linda, and Alan, and Judy. That's it. And some of them who were here moved away. Some just kind of faded away. Some, as such as you did, who died a few weeks ago, died. It's a part of life. And then, I'm not sure I really want to do this, but I'm going to. There's another category, and it's one of those that I call take my ball and go home. That have caused some serious changes. And it's if you don't get your way, you just go, I'm gone. And it's happened for many different ways. It hasn't happened in a while. It really hasn't, and I'm very happy with that. But where you want to do something and somebody else goes no, and then they get in a big argument and one of them gets, but from talking to my neighbor and my mother, that's no different than any church anywhere. That doesn't make us bad, it makes us normal. And I just think, in my opinion, I think it was kind of a bit of a violation of respecting each other. Because kerfuffles are just kerfuffles and we'll get past them. And it just takes listening to each other and taking ideas and blending them into something that works at least a little bit for everyone, win-win. And going back to that Sears example, but first of all, the closing of that thing was a boneheaded move. But once it was made, they could have written a book on how to do a layoff. It was done so well. I won't go into the whole details, but it was. And the separation deal was very generous, and they offered it to retail as well, because they wanted to trim a little bit of the fat. The problem was about 3 times as many people as they expected took the offer. So they had a whole ton of open jobs. Well, that meant some of the catalog marketing people just went right back to work for retail. And at the same time, Marshall Fields was being bought, and they had laid off their advertising staff. And those people then came and worked for Sears, a lot of them. And they made more money because Sears paid them. So I think there were a whole bunch of winners out of all that. I don't know what's going on now anyway. But unfortunately, that win-win where everything goes the way you really would like it is the exception and not. But in order to live our principles here at the UFB, we strive for that win-win. It isn't always possible. Sometimes circumstances forbid us from doing something that we want, but that's usually for now. It's not a permanent thing. For example, we have needed a new floor in here for a while, let's just say. But it also involves doing some work on the ceiling and the acoustical tiles, running cables for the technology, and that's all we know about. Because something else is going to pop up. It's a given. Yeah, they call them the known unknowns. There's an unknown, but you don't know what it is. But there is a difference between that elective change, fixing the floor, and things forced upon us, like when we had an oil spill a few years back. It's how we react that makes the difference. We can decide to just grumble and accept it, or solve it, or grumble and not do anything. It's up to us as individuals. Let's pick your battles. Is that really worth arguing about? I worked with a woman years ago who had worked in a nursing home. Now, you can tell how far we're going back, because she refused to wear a beeper anymore. Because when she was beeped at the nursing home, it meant somebody was dying and she had to get there right away. And after having that, her comment was, nothing else is even slightly that important. Even if it is money the company's losing and everybody's losing their heads, it's just money. But that stuck with me. And I think it's a good life philosophy. And I try to remember it when something pops up and upsets my personal apple cart. I honestly do not always succeed. A few of you have experienced that. But we try. And when you goof up, you say, okay, I'm sorry. It's all any of us can do, because every other chain pales in comparison to the big two that none of us are getting out of: life and death, birth and death. I think what we need to remember is the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you. Now, I don't know how I pulled this off, because I'm never flipped so early, but if we've got enough time for maybe 10 minutes of discussion, 5 minutes of discussion, if anybody wants to, otherwise we'll go to our closing song. Yes, Mr. John, and John.
Something we used to do is, after every service, have a dialogue. Point and counterpoint.
Pardon?
Point, counterpoint, you know, pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
Are we ever gonna do that again?
Okay, we do sometimes now. There was a reason for the I mean, the reason was not pretty that it was dropped. Is a couple of Sundays it got bad, yeah. And so we dropped it for a while. Dropped it and just thought, you know, let's see. But it's something we can think of bringing back at least periodically, like this moment. And the other John. Not the other John. John D. He wants the mic, I'm in trouble.
A lot of people, it's still online. You should be seen, right? So, I worked for an independent occupational medicine company for 15 years. We were consumed by a much bigger company called Concentric, which is nationally prominent in the occupational medicine field. What they brought in was a very heavily computerized system. I had never really worked with EMR before, electronic medical records. And this is going to be, you know, kind of an issue for Mary perhaps, but I found that their computer system, remarkably, instead of them having 500 or 600 offices nationally, was awful. I mean, it just was terrible. That trying to input information, clicking multiple buttons to make it happen, realizing the patient in front of me cannot leave until I finish all of the minutia of the system I'm using. I'm kind of trapped. So imagine the computer just shuts down, like my laptop just shuts off entirely, and I have to reboot because I can't get in. I can't freeze it. Number two, sometimes my dictation, like in the middle of the visit, will stop working or between visits. Number three, we use auxiliary programs to do physicals. Sometimes they don't work very well, and I'm sort of stuck in limbo. They can't get out and function further. And there's multiple other issues with the system. And if you don't click the right buttons, you can't finish the visit. You haven't checked everything, clicked all your boxes correctly. And by the way, I would say one of the teaching medical directors before when we first began said, you know why we use computers? And I was thinking it enhances patient care. No, it's for data collection because they bonus people and look at what we're doing in terms of quality, as with Medicare, by what you check and click and how you play the game on the computer, which was extremely frustrating to me. So last Wednesday, we have shortages, and by myself without a PA, seeing multiple people, I just really had up to my earlobes. And I basically, as I have before, had a major meltdown where I was angry, verbally, I was frustrated, I felt my heart pounding because I was so worked up about I couldn't get my work done. And so that's, you know, the lack of acceptance of change. I couldn't say the serenity prayer often enough. I couldn't say any prayer often enough. I was stuck in the moment, as has happened to many of us. I knew the right things to do to get myself out of the endless spiral of going down into extreme anger and frustration. But at the moment, as with many of us perhaps of that change, I could not extract myself from those feelings. I sent off one of those emails you should not send off the same day to my medical director above me about all the things that were wrong with the system. It's probably true, but not the right time to express myself. So I apologize in another email, as I often have to do the next day. But she gave me support and understood what I'm going through. But anyway, that's my comment about. I just wanted to be kind of extensive about how toxic change can be if you don't kind of accept it at some level. I'm hoping for improvement. I actually sent an email to the overall medical director of all of the entire corporation, who came back and said, yes, I hear you. And yes, I'm trying to revamp the entire IS system. So he realizes how bad it is, but in the moment, that changeover, as it has been for the last 14 weeks, has been very, very difficult for me in terms of trying to practice medicine as I see fit. With the computer, they are intruding in my work.
I can see Linda looking, she just looked like, oh, I get this.
Isn't technology wonderful? Nothing has the ability to set people off like technology. It doesn't work when it should.
Yes. Notice I was IT support, that is why I retired, it was technology.
And of course, Brooke, we appreciate everything you've done. Nobody's arguing with you. But I used to be a physical therapist. I still think I am, but I'm not working anymore. But one of the things they improved was we went from 1 page or 2 page written notes to 4 to 11 page typed computer notes so that we could, John, check all the boxes. And I was at a doctor recently, a new doctor, and he's handwriting everything. And he said, oh, so how do you like retirement? And I said, well, I missed all the people, but I don't miss the notes. And he goes, that's why I'm doing this. So he didn't accept the change of the computer. But I have another change that I really like. I have to hold on to it. Yeah, he said 2 weeks, wear the boot outside, which I didn't. But he said, then I can lose it.
Okay.
I'm in a place there at Sarah, where other people come in who cannot cope with the change of being there. They can't deal with the necessity of getting along with others and of getting things done. They can't deal with the necessity of meeting a kind of schedule they've never met in the past. So yeah, the place is full of changes, and for some of us, what a relief to get in a position where you have these changes and you don't have to make all the decisions, and you can relax during the day. Some people, there's a lady who is a screamer, and she screams about anything, everything. She screams for the nurse when does not need help at all. I think a lot of it is selfishness, but she screams that her daughter isn't there. She screams that the staff are not running well to assist her at every suspicion she has that she might be being neglected. And she starts screaming around 2 in the morning. That, in my career, I guess I could have gotten used to, but I wish she would be less selfish, and I wish she would shut up.
Go for it, Albert.
Back.
Hi, I'm Alex. I really appreciated this, and it came in a very good time. So my parents were depression era kids, so they kept everything. And their solution, when they got too much stuff, was to build houses with more storage. So, in the last, well, not in the last 5 years, but over a period of 5 years, 5 of my immediate family died. So there's only myself and my sister left. But I inherited my parents' house and it's 6,000 square feet.
Oh, my God.
And besides sort of having ancestor worship anyway, I have stuff from both sets of grandparents and my sister and brother-in-law, my husband, everybody else. And as I'm getting older, first of all, I can't get into, I can get into rooms, but I mean, I can't, like, I actually have a very small amount of space to live in because there's so much stuff. And also, because everybody's dead, I have this feeling like I have to hold on to it because otherwise they'll be gone. But as I've gotten older, I've started to realize that my kids don't want any of this. They don't want China. They really don't want China. They don't want all these sets of silver, silverware. It's just, my kids will look at it the way I look at it, which is I'm walking into this giant burden. And my one remaining sister, who lives in Utah, is far enough away that she can't carry anything significantly heavy on the plane. So she says things to me like, can you keep all of Grandpa's art books for me? So I've got Grandpa's art books in storage, but what the hell, she's never coming to get them. I just, it's like buying the archivist or something. And I really felt like I've been on, I'm semi-retired and I really felt like I've been under a burden. And now it's long enough that I'm starting to realize that's this really ugly cat pencil holder from the 1970s that I remember from my childhood will mean nothing to my children. And in fact, I've looked at it for so long, at first I went, oh, the childhood, the 70s. But now I'm like, that's an ugly pencil holder. So it really helped me because I feel like if I can move through and get rid of all of this stuff, keep some of the things that are important, but get rid of all this stuff and also not have to write down the story of each item because it's not good enough to keep the ugly pencil holder. I have to write that it always sat blah, 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 so that somebody understands the importance of it. And it doesn't matter. I've only got like 20, 30 years left on this life. I'll never get it done. And so I feel like this has been good for me because I need to move through, because I need to open up space for me, to get my world out there and to realize that they are all dead and that when I die, my memories of them will die. And any memories that other people have of them will go on. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm Linda. One of my previous lives, I headed up a strategy department, which basically meant our job was to change. Right? Senior management would go, oh, we need to evolve. Okay, change. I had a whiteboard, and one of the quotes, I have 2 quotes I've always up there, but the one that I think is really important for us to remember even now. Change is demoralizing when it's done to us. Change is exciting when it's done by us. So if you're thinking about there's change in your life and there's some people that are going to be impacted, get some buy-in from them, include them, make them feel part of it. Because if it's done to you, you're going to fight it.
Hi everybody, I'm Karina Jenkins, if you guys don't know me. So I was just thinking about change and I want to cry because I have 2 little ones. And I was thinking about growth and that we need change in order to grow. And it's, tucking away, the baby bottles, my youngest, we're done. There's no more kids. The little onesies, the dresses, and and I'm like, she's growing, they're growing. This teenager. Finding the joy in change because there needs to be growth. They're in a swim family. So finding the joy in change and growth, that was just kind of my thing. So it's great. So, but also potty training is great too. So, so change is great.
Well, thank you. See, we had a good conversation here. So join me in our closing song, 121, up on the building, up on the, not the board. It's not on the whiteboard, it's on the screen. We'll build a land. And by the way, the songs, I just like them. They're not actually apropos of the service at all. I'm just going to end with a comment about change from Marcel Proust. We believe that according to our desire, we are able to change the things around us. We believe this because otherwise we can find no favorable solution. We forget the solution that generally comes to pass is also favorable. We do not succeed in changing things according to our desires, but gradually our desire changes. We have not managed to surmount the obstacle as we were absolutely determined to do, but life has taken us around it. Let us past it, and then if we turn around to gaze at the remote past, we can barely catch sight of it. So imperceptible it has become. All right, this closes our recorded service. Thank you for joining us. And say when. Say along with me, we extinguish this fire, but not the light of wisdom, or the community, or the fire of the business. These we are in our hearts and in our hands, till we are together. Thank you. Coffee.